This is the Nightshade Cult, a podcast macabre.
We bid you welcome. Enter freely and of your own will.
I'm Nick Grimm.
And I'm David Graves.
And we will be your horror hosts for this dissection of Edgar Wright's 2004 Rom Zom Com, Shaun of the Dead.
Good evening.
Good evening. This was a late in the game curveball David threw at me. We had planned on doing something else, and he saw the anniversary was coming up, and he's like, what about this instead? And I jumped on it, and I'm so glad we did, because I love this movie, and I haven't watched it for a long time.
Yeah, I watched it in the theater, and that was it. I never saw it again. So 20 years ago, I saw this, and then I watched it. But I've always remembered this fondly, and I thought that this was really... This is kind of a pioneering horror comedy movie. There are, of course, lots of others, but this one kind of got big.
It did. It broke through. You know, it launched Simon Pegg's career. It launched Edgar Wright's career. It launched their career together. They made a trilogy of genre mashup films called the Cornetto Trilogy that this ended up being the first of. And they both went on to careers on their own, too. I had so much damn fun catching up with this movie.
For sure. So this was made for $6 million, and it box office for about 38 and change. It was, so that's pretty good. You know, multiply your budget by 6 and everyone's happy. And it came out to absolute critical acclaim. Everyone pretty much loved it.
Yeah.
Stephen King said it's a 10 on the fun meter and destined to be a cult classic.
Yeah,
so I'd
completely agree with that. Yeah. And it's, it's one of those things. I remember kind of having to twist my wife's arm to go see this because she's like, I don't really like zombie movies.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this isn't a regular zombie movie. This is something different. And then she became quickly an evangelist for the movie and was going around and telling like all of her friends that you need to watch this movie. This is great.
Yeah, it's really funny. Has a lot of kind of almost jump scary moments, but they're kind of just like creepy, almost schlocky.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that.
There was something I saw. It was an interview with Tarantino. I don't remember if it was for a podcast or for what it was on. Maybe his Video Archives podcast. But he was talking about how for a horror comedy to be successful, it has to be both. It has to succeed as a horror movie and as a comedy. It can't just be because otherwise it ends up like it's making fun of the other one.
Yeah.
And his example was probably the original horror comedy, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Because it absolutely works as a Frankenstein film, and then it works as an Abbott and Costello like screwball comedy. And this movie, it's fitting. Universal put this out in the States because it fits nicely into that Abbott and Costello, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost kind of being an Abbott and Costello for the 2000s.
Yeah, I fully agree. This is a kind of a classic formula. It even kind of follows loosely the hero's journey for Simon's character. So it's like some of the turns, like the call to action and stuff, are pretty subtle or maybe not extremely subtle, but you have to know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You don't realize that this is Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Or Harry Potter or any of those.
And
but
his cricket bat is his lightsaber.
Exactly, yeah. It really is. This is a hero's journey, and it works pretty well.
It's really interesting. I think a lot about the different writing styles that people have, and Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright, the way they really wrote the shit out of this movie.
Yes, there are so many references.
I've watched the video of them going through their, like, they have a big easel with like a big flip pad on it, where it's before they had written their screenplay, but it's where they broke down the beats of the movie.
Yeah.
And they had the movie basically written and partially storyboarded by themselves before they even wrote their screenplay. And the movie is pretty drum tight at like 90 minutes, and all of that writing shows. And
for sure. I read somewhere that they spent like 8 weeks working together, like pretty much just full time. They just locked themselves in and did it.
Which is just the person I was thinking of comparing them to, who I'm also a fan of, but just works totally differently, is Taika Waititi, where it's heavy on improvisation.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of improvisation in an Edgar Wright movie because he's got it so dialed in by the time the camera's rolling.
Yeah, these it feels a little Kevin Smith-ish.
There is definitely some Clerks homage, and one of the behind-the-scenes thing I saw... Nick Frost quoted Clerks in the behind the scenes stuff, and so it's like, the Kevin Smith influence is present there for sure. Because for indie film, even though his career isn't ever reached those heights again, it probably peaked back with Dogma. Kevin Smith was hugely influential in the late 90s.
Oh, for sure. And he's gone on to continue to make movies, even if they've never been as big as like Mallrats or Dogma or whatever. He's still doing that. I mean, and Wright probably has eclipsed Kevin Smith in commercial success.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So do we just want to jump into this dissection?
Yeah, why don't we roll the music and let's get into this.
Sounds great.
An unambitious electronics salesman has his pre-midlife crisis interrupted when London is hit by a zombie apocalypse, leaving him nothing to do but leave his friends and family to the one place he can think of, the neighborhood pub.
Yeah, that's really the whole deal. And one of the things that some of the cultists out there might know, but most wouldn't, is that is how we met, is selling electronics as soulless retail workers.
It is really funny because, especially when the movie came out, there was a strong resemblance, Simon Pegg, to what I looked like back in those days with the blonde hair and the goatee. And I mean, there's pictures of me in the short sleeve button-up shirt with the tie where I looks like I'm cosplaying Shaun of the Dead preemptively.
The plastic name tag, it takes me back. We had so many of those.
Oh yeah, I still have them all over my refrigerator.
I threw mine away. I
saved them. I've got so many, and I've got your name tag. I've got name tags for most of our friends.
Nice.
I've held on to that stuff.
We still know a lot of the people that we worked with 25 years ago.
That's what I consider those my college years. I went to Montgomery Ward's instead of university.
Yeah. A dead store.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone knows about that place.
Yeah. It was an ancient department store. Used to have everything.
And so, like, Simon, that's what I was thinking when I was watching it. I was like, Simon is Nick.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because he's got the teenagers that are sort of under him. Mm-hmm. And he's approaching 30. Like, he's like 29 years old. And he's in that point where his teenage job has just continued. And a lot of us hit that point, and we're no longer the shitty kid that is making fun of the manager. We have found ourselves becoming the manager at the department
and getting
store.
Made fun of.
Yeah, and it's like, wait, this isn't right. I'm supposed to be standing where you are.
I am the cool one.
Yeah. Look at my bleached blonde hair. Don't you see how cool I am?
Exactly. Yeah. So this story, resonates with us for that reason. But I think that it's just like we touched on before. This kind of masterfully blends horror and comedy, and I feel like this film was influential. Like when I was watching this, I was thinking, wow, this is like. I can see homages to Shaun of the Dead in Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which I love that movie. I'm an evangelist for Tucker and Dale. And so, like, I think that they really kicked the door open with regard to comedic horror in the mainstream.
They did, and they're a major part of the resurgence of zombies, too.
Great.
Because if you look at this came out just after Zack Snyder's remake of Dawn of the Dead, and maybe just before 28 Days Later. And it's one of those, like, the first movies that kind of kicks it off. And, The Walking Dead follows this and so many other things. Mm-hmm. So they were very ahead of the curve, and they were inspired Resident Evil, which is what kind of made them be like, no one's done a zombie movie in a long time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what got them on that track.
Resident Evil games. I haven't played one of those in a long time.
Yeah, I can still, because that demo, when we sold electronics, demo played all the time. So I always think, Captain Wesker, what is this? It looks like blood. I hope it isn't Chris's blood. You know, like that dialogue I've heard just so many times from the first Resident Evil game.
Yeah. And I think that another interesting point about the writing in this movie is how they're really successful at couching the story in a very ordinary, mundane world.
Yeah.
This is obviously a supernatural horror, but they do a really good job in a very short amount of time at couching this in an extremely mundane, boring setting.
Yeah.
And it's totally believable. It was just like banal watching him do his job and argue with his girlfriend. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Or just they repeat the scene twice. There's a lot of reiteration in the movie. So, but his walk in the morning to the corner store where he goes and gets his Diet Coke before he goes to work. And then he repeats it again after the Z-Day event or whatever has happened. And he's already in such a routine zombie mode that he doesn't even notice all of the things that he walks past because he's just already a zombie.
Yeah, that's sort of the meta criticism, is that everybody is in the modern society is already a zombie. So at a certain point, it would go unnoticed.
Yeah, and it's a metaphor for growing up and moving on too. The whole movie, he has to go through all these points, forgiving his stepfather, leaving the roommates behind so that him and Liz can move in together and start, building an adult life. All of the characters they literally die in the story, but they metaphorically die. It's about, spreading your wings and actually becoming an adult instead of maintaining your childhood, traditions, or what's the word I'm looking for? Habits.
Well, and even that is banal because even when he stays with Liz and they're a terrible couple, they suck together. Yeah. He had more chemistry with his old friend than with his girlfriend.
Well, that's true. That's why he kept him in the shed.
I mean,
he could not quite let go of Ed.
Yeah.
Because Ed's just a big lovable ape man, and you want to keep Ed.
Yeah, he's a complete ass. But yeah, I have had friends. I've been the friend that's the complete ass.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. I thought that was that was like a. I don't think it was miscasting or bad writing or anything, but it was like they spent so much time demonstrating how shitty of a couple they are. I just thought to myself, I was like, why are you staying, bro? And why is she staying?
Yeah.
You suck for each other.
Yeah.
Neither of you are happy. Interesting.
But what's the source of that unhappiness? Is it inherent to their personalities, or is it, he lives with, his college roommates basically, and she lives with, a guy that was in love with her from college and his girlfriend. And so maybe. How much is it their personalities aren't compatible, and how much is they've got dead weight that they're carrying along with them?
Maybe it's my romantic heart that says there needs to be more than simply we don't annoy each other anymore. They're not enthusiastic about it at all.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I don't think you're wrong. I just didn't clue in on that, I don't think.
Anyway,
interesting.
So I got a couple more points here, but like the hero's journey, I think that was one thing that I clicked in with almost immediately. When I started, I was like, oh yeah, he's in he's on Tatooine. It's a moisture farm, and like you can almost just beat for beat, and it's pretty cool. And I really enjoyed the friendship and loyalty dichotomy between him and Ed as they're kind of they're growing, and eventually Simon has to figure out, or Shaun has to figure out, this is actually kind of bad for me. Like, all of this is not great.
Yeah.
He never truly lets go because he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
But he kind of outgrows that friendship.
Yeah, he does. It's like I said, they both are carrying this sort of dead weight baggage along behind them, and it's time. They're turning 30, so it's time to be a grown up for real. That's why I called it a pre-midlife crisis, because that's not really.
Yeah, you hear about that quarter life crisis that people, they want.
Yeah. Ideally, that should have happened already, because that should happen, in your middle 20s. You have the quarter life crisis, but Shaun is a little behind. He's a little stunted.
And we all have those friends that take a little while to kind of arrive in adulthood
and figure that stuff out.
I mean, hell, I've got a few that are like closing in on 40 that still remind me a bit of Ed or Simon.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there yet. All right, so do you want to move on to visuals?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right.
Cinematographer is David Dunlap. It does have that 2000s sort of desaturated look that it seems like everything had in that time period.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that kind of dates it, but it's real naturalistic lighting. It's very it looks very grounded, I guess I say.
Yeah.
Realistic's probably the wrong word, but grounded. It looks very in its world.
For sure. The color palette in here is it's like a muted, subdued look overall. It's like there's almost all like really dim hues until the zombie outbreak, and then red is really the only bright color in the whole movie.
Yeah.
And that keeps coming up. Like, you've got red on you. You've got red on you from his pen to the blood and everything.
Yeah. There's just great foreshadowing in this movie, and that's going back a segment, but nothing's wasted. There's early on, Peter says the line about Ed's an animal, he should live in the shed.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the movie, Ed lives in the shed on a leash like an animal.
Yeah.
And so that you've got red on you is called back later when he's covered in blood, and his mom says the same thing to him. So it just everything is set up and paid off so expertly across the whole film.
Yeah, I like the practical effects in here where they used for all the zombies. They looked really good. Like, some movies do the zombies really overdone. They feel extremely, I guess, monstrous is the word.
Yeah.
These look like zombies, but they don't seem like more than zombies.
They're fresh zombies.
Yeah.
Really is what they are.
I mean, The Walking Dead really pioneered the different ages of zombies that they can experiment with, because it ran for however many seasons, way too many.
I think, isn't it still going in some form?
Yeah, I think so.
There's the Daryl in France show, and there was just recently like a Rick and Michonne miniseries. Huh. I gave up on Walking Dead a long time ago.
Yeah,
but it itself has become an animated corpse that keeps lumbering.
Yeah, it is become what it is lampooning. The other thing I note on my little bullet points here for visuals is that we've got so much kind of visual comedy that it's almost slapsticky sometimes. Oh, for sure. This, like pratfalls and that kind of thing really are not out of place in this movie. And then like ridiculous things, like when the zombies all reach into David's body and pull out his guts, and they tear off his arms and legs and everything. Yeah. It's not done in a gruesome manner. It's in a comedy manner. I don't know how a dismemberment is a comedy manner, but it just is.
Well, but it is very in keeping with the George Romero zombie movies, particularly Day of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
It owes a lot to those, and a little bit of Return of the Living Dead too. And there's an homage to Night of the Living Dead when Ed says, "Barbara, we're coming to get you," which is the dialogue from the beginning of Night of the Living Dead. The brother teasing his sister. He's like, "They're coming to get you, Barbara."
I haven't really watched those movies in a long time.
Shit. Well, there's three of them, so that's a perfect Nightshade cult series right there.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. At some point, we'll have to cue that up.
Yeah. Stuart Bray and Barry Gower are the prosthetic makeup artists on the zombies. And then production design is by Marcus Rowland and costume design by Annie Harding. And I believe Rowland and Harding, or Hardinge maybe. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Annie.
Yeah, she listens.
Yeah, they went on to work with Edgar Wright many times in the future on other films.
Nice. Well, I mean, you want to just move on to the audio and sound?
Yeah, we're kind of cruising.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a simple movie, really.
Yeah.
This I think that the sound design in this movie was subtle, and I like that.
Yeah.
I don't like if it's a bombastic action movie, that's great.
Yeah.
But in a movie like this, it's important that there's atmosphere. Like there should be some light scratching at doors here and there, and there should be some like bumping and thumping like a zombie would.
Yeah.
But I really don't want crazy in your face added in sound after the fact.
No, and I'll give you, so here's like two examples, and then the supervising sound editor was Julian Slater, and I'll give you two examples I think of really just standout sound design, because they're not sounds from that are caught on mic. They're sounds that are added in for comedic effect. The second morning when Shaun slips in the blood at the convenience store, there's just a nice slurk sort of sound as he slides, and the squeak of shoes on linoleum, and that gets a laugh. Like in the theater, that gets a huge laugh, and it's still effective to this day. That insertion of that sound makes that physical comedy land in a big way. And the other one is the clicking on the disposable camera when Ed's taking pictures of things. They kind of crank up that sound. So it's very obvious because the mic wouldn't pick up that real subtle clicking.
Yeah.
But you turn that up, and it just, it's one of many, many things that add to the picture of why Ed is a bit of a numbskull. And it, again, great big laugh. Disposable cameras are a thing young people might not know about.
Yeah, I was just thinking that this is a thing that really dates the movie in the setting, is that like when Shaun is on the phone in his apartment, he's got the big chunky cordless like 900 megahertz phone.
Yeah, he could probably walk to the corner store with that.
Oh yeah, and then there's no ubiquitous camera phones that are everywhere. Like
in 2004, a flip phone with a camera on it would be a neat new feature, and it would take terrible pictures.
Yeah, there were mobile phones, and there were mobile phones in this movie, like because Ed has one.
Yeah.
People call him to buy weed.
Yeah,
and
he's got one of those classic Nokias, right?
Yeah, or it flips open. Yes, it's a little clamshell.
Yeah,
and
maybe a Motorola.
They were around. We had them, but they didn't have cameras. Like I remember owning a separate camera, a digital camera. Yeah, it was like 3 megapixels, and it was like hot shit at the time.
Yeah, that was having a camera on your phone was just starting to creep out at that point. So yeah, disposable cameras. You buy them at the drugstore. And a real camera is expensive, but disposable cameras, and you drop the whole thing off at the developer, and they give you your pictures back.
And one thing, like when you're winding the film, like with the little thumb wheel, it had a real tactile and kind of noisy ratcheting sound. Yeah. And so they really captured that. So, I mean, those of us who spent a lot of time with disposable cameras in our day, that really kind of was a nostalgia moment, the ratcheting and the click. And it's kind of an interesting throwback moment. Whereas I know some people use a digital clicking sound on their digital cameras, like DSLRs, and even some people turn it on the cell phone. Yeah, it makes a nice little click sound, so you get a little feedback. But back in the day, that was all you had. Everything made a click.
Everything made a click. Everything was mechanical. Yeah, I used to take those to concerts because, especially if if it got confiscated or something by security,
it's no big loss.
It's no big loss. You just chuck it in the trash. And
I think they were like $6 or something.
Yeah, something like that. But it wasn't something you're like, well, shit, I have to walk this back.
Oh, that was $6 20 years ago. So I think $12.
Yeah, I think they were cheaper than that.
Yeah,
they were probably around $4.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
like you buy the 5-pack, the Kodak ones that come with like 5 of them in the strip. Yeah,
good times. So I think Slater's sound design is just sort of like perfectly executed on those little things where he just punches up the sound just to enhance the comedy of the scene.
For sure. I know there was music in this movie, but it really wasn't notable to me.
Okay.
I really kind of overlooked it.
It was first of all, the reason I think you overlooked the score is because there's so many needle drops in it, and so the soundtrack sort of overwhelms the score a lot of
for sure.
But the score is by Pete Woodhead and Daniel Mudford, and they've gone on to be regular Edgar Wright collaborators too. It's very sort of lo-fi hip hop meets John Carpenter, which I think is sort of perfect for the tone of the film. I actually wish you heard more of it in the movie. Maybe we could have, there's like 3 or 4 songs from the band Ash, who are a nice little indie rock band from the UK, but maybe we could have had one Ash song and a little more prevalent score, just in my opinion, because I think it is a really cool score, but it's overshadowed by all the needle drops.
Speaking of needle drops and soundtracks, just this past week, I got asked to come into the studio and do vocals for a track for an upcoming independent movie that has a heavy metal song in it where they needed a black metal style vocalist.
Ooh, that's exciting.
So I went and did that, and I will share the details once I can't even. I was told the name of the movie, but I can't even remember it. I'll be sharing the details of that. But it just came to mind. And I thought it was pretty cool because they were like, I could do the vocals myself, but then I wouldn't be able to talk for 3 days. Why don't I just call the guy that does this?
Hire a professional. You're never mad at yourself for having a professional do something the right way.
Yeah. So that's I like soundtrack sometimes, not just score. Like there were some fun moments, like when they were throwing the records and there was music playing. You know?
Or obviously like the Queen features really heavily. There's a lot of the kind of the final battle in the pub. So much of it is kind of timed like beat out to the rhythm of the Queen song. Like even the flipping the lights on and off is on beat with the song. It's really really well choreographed to the music, and that's something that Edgar Wright has continued to do. Like Baby Driver does that really well too, where it the action of the movie is timed to the needle drops that he's using. I mean, I think in regards to the needle drops, I think his taste is really good, and he's always really good at picking songs that go well with his movie. But I just think it overshadows the score. Not to harp on that.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess let's move on to performances and casting. Yeah. So of course Simon Pegg as Shaun, right?
Yeah, this is I think in the States, none of us had ever seen Simon Pegg before.
No.
Spaced, the TV show that him and Edgar did before this, really didn't get to us until well after Shaun of the Dead. So I think the audiences in the UK probably already knew him, but he was a revelation to us, a brand new guy, and just a super relatable schlub. Kind of perfect that version of that dude.
He really gives you that everyman vibe. Like he's just like a regular guy with regular problems, but then also his own comedic timing as an actor is excellent. So he's able to really just make the character simultaneously really droll, but also really funny. Yeah,
he's it's probably because he was a bit of a breakdancer in his youth, and you see like he does a windmill when he gets up off the off the floor when he gets knocked down by the zombie in the pub owner zombie. And it's probably that background in dance that gives him the body control to do the sort of both stunts and like the trips and slides and things that he does that look so natural, but they're just sort of perfectly timed and hilarious.
Yeah, he does a great job. I mean, it's funny. Breakdancing is in the zeitgeist right now with the Olympics and all that stuff.
Yeah, shouts to B-Girl Raygun from Australia.
Being very original.
Oof.
The memes are great, though.
The memes are great. I feel a little bad for her. Someone on Twitter described it as she qualified in the Oceania qualifier, so that's Australia, New Zealand, and whatever else is down there. I don't know what other countries fall under Oceania, which was kind of one of the weaker brackets, essentially. So she made it through in a place where there's not a huge amount of really high-end breakdancers. And sometimes that happens in the Olympics. You qualify for your country, and your country just doesn't have... You're the best of your country.
Yeah, like if you're you're the fastest person in Myanmar, you're probably not gonna do great in the world stage.
Yeah, so sometimes that stuff happens. So keep your chin up, Raygun.
Yes, just keep popping and locking and kangarooing.
Yeah, she does a little kangaroo.
Yeah, it's really funny.
Yeah.
All right, so how about Nick Frost as Ed?
Nick Frost as Ed. Yeah. Ed is a complete asshole, but
I fucking hate this guy.
But you hate him, but like you understand. Everyone has had a friend like Ed where you've been friends forever and you love this guy, and anytime you bring him around, everyone hates him. Like he's just that dude, but I just can't help but love old Ed.
Yeah, he's a troll. He does a lot of it intentionally. Some of the stuff he does is just casually disrespectful on accident. It's not even trolling.
Yeah.
He just is oblivious that his behavior is really terrible.
Yeah.
Nobody's taking him to task for it.
Yeah, like I don't think like he has a problem with Pete, who is Shaun's actual flatmate.
Who pays bills?
Like he's just sleeping on the couch there at their little townhouse or row house, whatever you call it in the UK. And he just thinks Pete is completely unreasonable for always being on his ass while all he does is like smoke weed and play like Sega Genesis. Or I guess it's probably PS1 that he's playing.
Yeah, I don't know what controller it was. I'm not good at that.
Maybe it was a Sega Saturn. It looked like a Sega controller to me, but
like a Dreamcast.
Nah, because the Dreamcast is a different color because it was black. So I think a Saturn.
Okay,
which that's all right from that time period. Let's go deep dive onto the consoles of the early 2000s.
Let's do a whole episode on the origin of consoles.
Yeah, good old Ed. And it's foreshadowed. Ed ends up the zombie. He lives in the shed like an animal by the end of the film.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So who do you got next?
Kate Ashfield as Liz.
Yeah.
I really like Liz. I think Liz is very reasonable to want more from life.
Yeah, she's realistic.
Yeah, Liz. She's an English teacher. I don't think they say what grade level, but I'm thinking middle school or maybe high school. And she's just a little fed up with the rut that they are stuck in, where, everyone likes to go down the pub, have a pint, but, we don't always need to bring these people with us, and sometimes we should go to do actually grown-up things.
Yeah.
So I think Liz is completely reasonable in wanting to move on with life in a certain way.
Yeah, I like Liz as a sort of she's a more adult than Shaun, who is a more adulty adult than Ed.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of cascades. Like Shaun has baggage, and Liz has baggage with her two flatmates who are not so bad, but they're always around, and that's annoying. And David is obviously still pining for her.
Yeah, David is the worst, actually. Like, of all of the people in the movie, David is an absolute twat, to use the phrasing
you
of their
should
world.
Never string those words together again.
I know that's what the gossip rags will pull.
Yeah, that'll
out.
be a soundbite. Someone will make that a short. Be like, Nick says David is a twat.
Is this the end of the Nightshade Cult?
Yeah, so he is. He's the worst. He's on at the end of my cast list, but he's on there. Yeah, I think Kate Ashfield did a good job in her performance. As being kind of the token voice of reason all the time, and her voice of reason, like logic and all of that, was always reasonable.
Yeah,
like it never was outlandish. She was never being a wet blanket. She was always. It was like, okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from.
A dumber movie than this would make Liz out to look like a real bitch,
like a harridan.
Yeah, and Shaun would end up with a Jenny McCarthy sort of super hot girl that's also an uber dork that likes
basically doesn't exist.
Yes, that likes to sit around with him and Ed and play Sega.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, so I think they do a really good job, and that comes down again to Edgar and Simon's writing. When you look at their story breakdowns, they have pages of sort of character background for all of the characters and what their motivations are and why they behave the way they do. And she feels like a lived-in person because they did that background work. And they wrote her as a three-dimensional person, and then Kate Ashfield portrayed her as a three-dimensional person.
Well done. So I've got Bill Nye as Philip, his stepdad.
Bill Nye is always great.
Yeah,
he's so dependable.
I mean, like, I liked him in the Underworld movies. I mean, he goes from being a vampire lord to being like an annoying stepdad really well.
It's all transferable. Who is he in the Pirates movies? Long John Silver. He's like the squid face guy, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so much makeup.
Yeah, Bill Nye is just absolute legend, and he kills it with Philip because he captures this, like, you absolutely see why a kid, because so much of the movie is about leaving your teenage self behind, right? So
it's really a coming of age story.
Why teenage Shaun would have hated Philip, because he's a bit of a hard ass, and he doesn't trust you to drive his cool car, and he's not your dad, all that sort of classic stuff. But in his dying moments, Philip kind of confesses, like, I always saw how brilliant you were, and I just thought you needed someone to push you, and I thought I could be that person, and it's really it really lands. Like, they both really act the scene really well, and it's one of the when Simon has to let go of both of his parents over the course of the movie, and he cries, and they have a really good emotional moment together there. So yeah, Bill Nye, legend.
Yeah, that was a really good dramatic scene. That was good casting. They spent their casting dollars well. And then we got Penelope Wilton as Barbara, his mom.
Oh yeah, another awesome. She was just so good in this. Kind of the perfect space cadet mom. Yeah,
like thought she was zombie or something. No, I was far away.
It was just like when she's like, Philip got mugged this morning. They were a bit bitey. That's one Lisa and I have gone on to quote for forever. Kind of
bit bitey.
Anytime like if the cat gets you when you're roughhousing or whatever, ooh, he's a bit bitey. So yeah, she's so good. And then like I just said a little bit ago, they have such a great emotional moment where Shaun has to put her down when she turns.
Yeah,
because she's been hiding her bite. Classic zombie movie.
Yeah,
trope.
it's always someone.
But she has like the most wholesome reason for hiding her bite. Like usually people do it because they just can't face up with the reality.
They want to survive.
Yeah, but she just didn't want to worry Shaun, and yeah, she's again just really awesome in the role.
Yeah, it was a really solid performance. I've got Lucy Davis. Lucy Davis as Di.
God, I love Lucy Davis because for those of us who the original Office was their Office, Lucy is the Pam of that show.
Such a hipster you are.
And so I have a lot of Bilbo shows up briefly.
I noticed that. Yeah,
in this too. So he was the Jim of the original Office.
Okay.
So we have a few cast members of The Office on here, and I think Lucy Davis is great as Diane. She's a drama teacher. She coaches everyone how to act like zombies, so they can walk through the crowd of zombies, which Walking Dead totally cops this later and has them do that same thing.
Oh yeah.
Only they cover themselves with goop and are much more
and like
gory.
Zombieland. Yeah. Bill Murray pretending to be a zombie.
Yeah, this gets bit a few times, and I always love when Lucy Davis shows up in something. Most of them are TV actors or what we call like veteran British character actors.
Okay.
In this movie, and all just, I don't know, I think it's the UK drama schools or something like that. The UK just churns out professional ass actors that do a really good job. And
then I've got Dylan Moran as David.
Yeah, twat.
The worst.
He's so obnoxious.
The performance was excellent. The character was horrible.
Yeah. It's funny when that happens where you hate the guy and so you're like, I didn't write anything down about him. He's just a dick.
Yeah.
And he's just a naysayer. He talks a lot of shit but doesn't provide solutions. And
I always hate that person.
Yeah. He just shoots everything down.
Yeah, the one who picks everything apart but offers no help.
Yeah. It's not useful. That's not a useful behavior. If you can't say, that wouldn't work, but we can do this. And then he does and this is not the performance. This is criticizing the character. He throws a trash can through the window of the place that they're planning on sealing themselves up in and leaves this huge hole that they half-assed barricade with benches and stuff.
Yeah, that was really stupid.
Yeah. What a twat.
This movie is filled with stupid horror movie moves, but that's how they wrote it.
Yeah, you gotta have those.
And that's all the people that I have for the cast. I mean, that was pretty much all the major characters.
Well, we got Pete, played by Peter Serafinowicz, who's the other flatmate.
Yeah,
and
he gets some good screen time.
He's have you watched The Tick?
No, I haven't.
Because he plays the Tick in the Amazon version of the Tick, and I'm so used to him in these sort of the British like stick up his ass guy that he usually plays in things, that when he plays the cartoon superhero, that it's hard to remember it's even him because it's so outside of his normal style. Yeah, but that's the end of my list basically too.
All right. Well, then let's wrap it up on this one. What was your personal highlight?
My personal highlight is the reiterative scenes.
Okay.
Where you see the characters going through the same routine in slight variations, and particularly it's the morning walk on the way to the store. The second walk, the one after the zombie apocalypse has begun, was the very first day of shooting on the film. They did that. Edgar Wright wanted to do a really complicated scene to set the tone for the level of filmcraft that they were going to be attempting for this movie, and kind of get everyone on board with like, we're making a real movie. It might sound like a joke, but this is going to be a movie and not a joke. And so that scene is just, it's written and choreographed within an inch of its life. And then they go back after they shoot the second day, later, and shoot the normal day. And that's just seems sort of crazy to me to do it reverse. Like, but I guess, so you take away the garbage and you take away the carnage and stuff, and take things back for doing it do the second day first. Anyways, that sequence is my personal highlight.
Very cool.
Or those two sequences. What about you? What's your personal highlight?
So I was really thinking about this because there wasn't a scene that like really stuck out to me as like, this is the scene of the movie. Like some movies really have one thing that kind of, that's the look, that's the movie. So I picked when they're in the bar, when they're in the pub, and they finally have that kind of face-off with David. Mm-hmm. And then he is subsequently dismembered and torn apart by the zombies in that kind of iconic scene that's an homage to Romero. And it's partially because it was really well done, but also because David is a twat.
It is, and it's because he leaves, right? Because they confront him with the fact that he's in love with Liz.
And that's the only reason he came and all of that.
And it's the only reason he lives with her, even though he's got a great girlfriend of his own. Mm-hmm. He's still fixated on this other girl. And when he's confronted with it, he decides, I'd rather walk out into this horde of zombies than to face the consequences of my action, basically, and be accountable. Yeah. So real mature move there.
Yeah. I'd rather die.
I'd rather die than admit all of you are right.
Yeah. There were probably better ways to handle that. If you're David.
Did you watch any of they're all on YouTube, but they call them plot holes, and they're storyboards for what happened to characters in times when they're off camera?
No, I didn't.
Okay, because there's one for Lucy where she charges out with David's leg, and basically she ends up hiding in a tree until the military has cleaned up the mess, basically. Okay. And there's just a few of they're not animated, but they're just sort of dialogue and storyboards that fill in gaps that didn't fit into the movie.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. All right. So, what worked for you?
I think that the pacing and editing of this movie kept it moving, and obviously that also goes to writing. Yeah. But basically, this movie was tight. There weren't a bunch of wasted moments. There weren't a lot of throwaway scenes. There were a few moments early on in the movie that really hit home for me, so I put those in the what worked for you. Mm-hmm. The droll, boring retail life was just so perfectly depicted. They must have worked retail sometime in their life.
One of the two of them, if not both of them,
because
did some clerking.
It's exactly like that. Yeah. You have your shitty manager you don't respect, and then eventually you become the shitty manager that nobody respects. And the unprofessional youth, holy shit! Like taking the phone call in the meeting, and just being just sassy and shitty, like that was so realistic.
So actually, let's do one more casting, because shouts to Rafe Spall as Noel, because Noel is David. When we worked retail, with the way he talks shit to the manager.
Oh yeah, I was snide and shitty and never respectful. It was
and why should you be? Because they're cunts.
Yeah.
until you become 30.
Yeah, exactly. Why should I respect the guy who works fucking here? It's like I always say things like, if I'm your age and still work here, I'll know I'm a loser.
Ooh, they don't like that.
Yeah, they don't like that at all. Anyway, so then lastly, I really enjoyed the callback jokes. There was a lot of self-references. There were also a lot of references outside of the movie, like in the newscast when it talks about the monkeys and stuff, which is like the origin of the 28 Days Later zombie movie. And basically, this movie is chocked with references, like all over the place. And it was really good. So what about you? What worked for you?
I'm going to echo you on most of these. So the tight plotting and the way things are foreshadowed and paid off just repeatedly throughout the film. The ensemble cast, particularly the comedy duo of Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. I think that they just, that was just lightning. Whenever the two of them ended up meeting each other, that was just a brilliant pairing. And the genre mashup, like, they nail it. They nail the zombie movie. This absolutely belongs on the shelf next to Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and all the classics.
Yeah.
But it is also a romantic comedy that if you're a fan of romantic comedies, this movie completely works as a comedy. Like, you don't have to be a zombie fan.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, I think that it does both genres justice. So this is a harder one. What didn't work for you?
Yeah, I had to search for stuff on this one, and I got tired of the bickering between Shaun and Liz.
Okay.
I thought it just... when you're establishing something in a movie or in a story, you need to establish it and then occasionally reinforce it.
Yeah.
But it kind of felt like this was just it just never ended. I'm just
long.
like, and it wasn't one-sided. It wasn't her griping at him. Normally it was actually her calling him and being nice and him being a complete letdown of a shitty boyfriend. But it was just like, man, this banter is not interesting.
Yeah.
Skip it.
Okay.
Go forward. We get it. He's a shitty boyfriend. She's kind of out of his league at this point. He's not living up to his end. I just found it to be banal.
Okay.
I did not want to listen to it anymore. And then in every horror movie, people make stupid errors. They do dumb things like the breaking of the window, etc. But Ed kept doing it over and over. Like, he's taking a call and he sits down on the thing. I don't remember what he sits down on about the weed when the zombies are closing in on them.
Yeah.
And then when they're inside the pub, he starts up the loud ass video game and draws them in. And I'm just like, come on. Like, he's a dumbass and a buffoon, but it's just
too much.
It's too much. It's nobody's that dumb. Like, you would have to be afraid for your life at that point. You've watched people be literally dismembered. Why are you starting up a loud ass video game? Like,
he did win at the video poker machine, though.
Yeah, I just was like, Ed is too dumb. The writing pushed him over the edge for me. He's not believable. Like, you can be a loser and a couch potato, but that stupid? Come on. Every drug dealer I've ever met has been at least some level of crafty.
Well, Ed's not a very successful drug dealer.
Yeah, that's true. Because he doesn't have any supply, and people kept calling him about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that didn't work for me. What about you?
I really had to rack my brain to come up with something, and I felt like the sort of Deus Ex Machina of the army showing up at the end,
like that.
Felt just a little too. We've accomplished all of our story goals, but don't know how to wrap up how they survive.
Yeah.
And so, like, it just sort of barely works. It's like, it's not enough that it ruins the movie for you, but it's just not a very strong ending on what has been an extremely strong movie up until that point.
Yeah, it's a plot hammer.
Yeah. And it's just like, well, everyone they have shed all of their baggage and they're ready to face their 30s together as hardened warriors. And somehow there has to be a way that they come out of this. And the army shows up as that. And I just felt like, that's not the strongest ending.
Yeah.
But that was I really had to scratch my head to think hard for that one. So, final thoughts.
So I was really thinking about this, and I always examine how I rate films, and I feel like this was a really strong film. So it's definitely a 4 or a 5 in my opinion. And I think I came down on the side of just I'm going with my feelings. I don't have a lot of logic here. I'm going with a 4 because I really liked this, but I didn't love it. Okay. I wasn't like cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs over it. Yeah. I thought it was funny, but not like hilarious. Okay. I thought it was scary, but not that scary. Yeah. I thought it was good, but not amazing.
It just didn't have that little bit of sauce that would put it to a 5.
Yeah, it didn't have me like recommending it to everyone and going on and on about it. I was just like, wow, that was pretty great.
Yeah.
Done. How about you? What did you rate it?
For me, there's always a sort of point in the movie when you're watching a really good film where it's like, well, from here on out, if they don't shit the bed, this is at least a 4, unless they just totally shit it. But then when I get to the end, like, of a movie like this, where if I have a really hard time filling in the blank on my note sheet of the what didn't work for you, then I have to ask, well, why wouldn't this be a 5? If you don't have anything to pick apart about it, what doesn't make it a 5? Is it just your bias that this sort of genre entertainment just isn't 5s? Like, I think it's like an internal prejudice almost, where we have to be self-deprecating about our nerd shit.
Can a Transformers movie be perfect?
It hasn't happened yet, but I won't rule it out. And so ultimately, I needed to come down on the side of the 5. I've been tossing out a lot of 5s lately. Last episode was a 5 too, but I think this is similar to Alien in the way I think it is plotted and written out within an inch of its life, and it is so well planned and so well executed. It has to be considered a 5.
Okay, I respect that. I was thinking of it. I was like, do I put this in the same category? Can I say Shaun of the Dead and Blade Runner? Can I say Shaun of the Dead and Alien? And I came down with no. But I respect that you said yes. Yeah. I don't think it's of those caliber, but the universe is sort of in agreement. It's a 7.9 on IMDb and a 92 on Rotten Tomatoes. So maybe a 4.5-ish.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if we gave ourselves those fractions to lean on, that's probably where both of us were, is at that 4.5. Like, this is a really good 4-star movie, or it just squeaked it through with a 5.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go ahead and take a quick break, and then we'll come back with The Vault of Darkness.
Before we delve into the Vault of Darkness, we ask that all initiates of the cult follow us on your favorite social media platforms at Nightshade Cult.
If you've enjoyed this content, help us grow the cult by sharing it with like-minded people and leave us a review wherever you listen.
Well, do you have any dark tidings before we get into the Vault of Darkness?
No, not really. Nothing new.
I had one. Well, do you want to tell us about your trip to Sweden, actually, a little bit?
I could just briefly, yeah. I went to Sweden. We spent about 10 days in and around Stockholm. And the reason we went is because my wife and I are history nerds and reenactors, and I'm a history teacher.
Huge fans of the TV show Vikings, both of them.
Yeah. And so we went there and we visited pretty much every major museum in Stockholm itself, but also went outside of the city to one of the major it's hard to explain. So in the Viking era, there was a town called Birka, or we say it Birka in English because that's how it's phonetically spelled, but they call it Birka. Yeah. And basically it was like a big trading hub. And if you don't know, Stockholm and most of the southeastern part of Sweden is just a big archipelago. It's literally hundreds of islands. And so this is one of those islands, and it used to be a port where people would come and trade from all over the place. And there are tons and tons of graves there, pre and post Christianization, because it existed during the transition time. And then, because of various factors, I could give you a whole lesson on it. Basically, the city just closed. It just went away. But
it's like when they put a interstate freeway in, and the old Highway 99 town just dies.
Yeah, and so basically, all of the city archaeology, like everything that was there, it was all intact. No city had been built over top of it, destroying it or unearthing it. And so it's the number one source of Viking age archaeological finds in the world, and for Scandinavia, of course. And it was absolutely amazing. We did the whole tour thing, but we also went off the beaten track and just walked like to the other side of the island, and we found these huge barrow mounds and ancient ship graves, 1,000-year-old things, and it's just absolutely amazing. And not all of the island has been excavated by archaeologists. There's still something like 2/3 of it have not been unearthed, but they still have artifacts from the last dig, roughly 18 years ago, that they're still cataloging and studying. So they're not starting a new dig before all that happens. So it's a World Heritage Site. And then we went to Uppsala, which is the kind of an ancient capital before it moved to Stockholm, kind of like Kyoto in Japan. And it's a beautiful ancient city. And there are in old Uppsala, or Gamla Uppsala, there's a place that has the burial mounds of kings, and they're these huge ancient burial mounds, and they have this ancient churches and all this stuff. And it was just an amazing history nerd trip. We also went to every single goth and heavy metal shop in Stockholm. There were some really cool places.
Yeah, got some cool loot.
Got some cool stuff, music stuff. Carrie got a bunch of really cool like clothes and stuff.
Any vinyl?
I didn't find any vinyl that I wanted. No. I looked. I went to Sound Pollution, like the oldest record store in Stockholm, and they had a bunch of cool stuff. But
did you find your own record there?
I did not. I looked, but and then I went to this vintage guitar store that was recommended on this YouTube video by this musician I follow. And oh my God, they had so many amazing guitars from like 60s, 70s, 80s Gibsons, and some from the 50s, like 2 late 50s Gibsons. And I was drooling. They had this white Les Paul Custom from like 1982 that I was like, I want to buy that so bad. It was in great condition, but it had like that vintage mojo.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to drop, like $5-6 on a guitar when I have plenty of guitars. I'm no shortage.
And a big purchase like that when you're on vacation sort of puts you in and now I can't do anything else. Like,
leave it in the hotel. Well, I mean, it's all the money is spent, but I just was like, no, really, in real, I would have had to spend my race car money on it because I want to buy a race car. But yeah, that was my trip to Sweden. Sweet. And it was really, really cool. Everyone there was very nice. Everyone in Sweden, super nice. Everyone speaks English. They teach it in primary school. So if you feel like going to Scandinavia, check out Stockholm. It's the biggest city in Scandinavia, so you'll really like it.
You never really ever encounter someone from a Nordic or Western European country that doesn't speak English flawlessly.
Yeah, they like if they want to talk to each other, English is the common ground.
Yeah.
So it's like everyone there speaks English, and people kept coming up to me and speaking Swedish to me, or at shops.
You're super tall.
Yeah, I'm tall and I'm white, so everyone was just like speaking Swedish to me, and I said, "Oh, I don't understand Swedish. Do you speak English?" Or I could head them off at the pass to say like hello or whatever in Swedish. It's hey, H-E-J. And that's like not an informal greeting like here.
Yeah.
That's literally them saying hello. They say, hey. So they say, hey, I say, hello. And they're like, English.
Yeah.
So that was how I would subtly cue them.
Yeah.
And they would just instantly code switch and talk to me that way. It's pretty cool.
That's, that's really nice. It's you, not to disparage our education system, you're an educator. It'd be nice if we had that.
It would be pretty cool. So if you want to be like cool Swedish, you say hey when you see someone, which you probably already do. But when you're saying goodbye, you say hey.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you say it twice.
Well, that's a good lesson.
Quickly. So you can just, it's like aloha. It's hello and goodbye.
Excellent. Well, I had one dark tiding before we get into our Vault of Darkness, and this is where we were recording very close to dropping the episode. So for once, our dark tiding is not extremely stale.
Yeah, my vacation put us off.
Yeah. It's that Universal announced they're finally found someone to put out or to at least produce, possibly direct, a remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Ooh.
And it is none other than James Wan. This is the first project that he's announced since his giant monster production company merged with Blumhouse. And, we've talked about before, Blumhouse is doing a Wolfman. Blumhouse has been doing these real cool, gritty...
They're kind of the cool guys in horror right now.
Yeah, for sure. And... I think if you have seen Aquaman, James Wan is the right dude for Creature from the Black Lagoon, because he has there's a whole middle part of that movie that is very aquatic horror.
Yeah.
And has like deep sea fish monsters, and like it's very creature influenced. And it's like, oh yeah, this totally makes sense that he's the guy that would be like, Creature, that one's mine.
Can we get Momoa in the creature suit?
Hell yeah.
He would want to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets killed by the creature at some point in that movie.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. And so they describe this. He hasn't officially signed on to direct yet. He's just producing at this point. But the scuttlebutt is that he's also directing it. And they described it. Where did it go? A grounded, modernized retelling that leans into the visceral horror while paying respect to the original classic. And this is just one of those things where I think this is the right director, right project.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm
glad to hear it.
The creature, with all respect to Dracula, Creature's top 3 monsters for me: Frankenstein, Wolfman, Creature.
Wow. So I really like Creature. I think it's really cool. Like when I was a kid in grade school, there was a monster movie book in the library that I would always go and look at. And one of the best pictures is the whole little section is pictures and stills from the creature from the Black Lagoon. Yeah. I loved that as a kid.
That suit holds up to this day. I think that is still a great monster. And the underwater photography in that movie is insane. Like, because there's all of this stuff where the creature is the damsel of the movie is swimming on the surface of the water, and the creature is swimming underneath her and kind of copying her movements and everything. Yeah. And that's a guy in a suit holding his breath, doing shit for real. There's no CGI. There's nothing there in 1954. And I think that movie just holds up really well. I took my, Zoomer nephew to go see that movie, and he was like, I'm just going to play video games on my phone through this whole thing. I was like, okay, that's fine. I already have the tickets, so that's fine. You can do that. And he was enwrapped with that movie. He was like, that was really fucking good.
It is. It's a classic for a reason.
He's like, are there other? Because they showed like a trailer for some noir movie beforehand, and he's like, that other movie looked really good. Are there other old movies that are really good like that? It's like,
dude, many.
many. There was so much stuff that happened before the year 2000, my dude.
Yeah. Yeah, movies they have been good almost since the start.
Yeah, there's always been people making exceptional films. Yeah. For sure. All right. What are you pulling out of the Vault of Darkness?
All right, so this is pretty much the first zombie movie we've done, and so we got a plethora of options.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I was thinking, there video games. You got Resident Evil. You got The Last of Us 1 and 2. Amazing.
Do you consider the cordyceps as zombies? They kind of are.
Yeah, that's just a reskin.
It's just a mushroom zombie.
Yeah, shroom zombies. But I wanted to grab, and I've read a bunch of books that are zombie based because I like post-apocalyptic fiction. But I'm going to recommend one that you probably haven't heard of because I wanted to just get maybe a deep cut that is fun. Because that's what Shaun of the Dead is. It's fun, you know. Like, so if you like Shaun of the Dead and you like Zombieland, which I really like that movie. I think that's a really.
I haven't seen the second one.
I haven't seen the second one. I watched the first one and it was really good.
Why does that happen? Sometimes you love a movie and the sequel comes out and you're like, oh, one was good.
Yeah, I like Zombieland as much as this movie. It's really good. Anyway, so in that spirit, there is a series of books. I listen to them on audiobook.
Yeah. This is Audible.
Yes. Adrian's Undead Diary is what it's called. Ooh. And it is a 14-book series. But for one credit, there's an omnibus. It's called Omnibus Volume 1. It collects the first 4 books. It's almost 40 hours of content for one credit. You really can't go wrong. 40 hours. And it's 40 hours that's entertaining. It's literally a diary by a guy named Adrian. So it's written in the first person. He's, it'll be like, "Dear Mr. Diary, you won't believe what happened since last time I wrote. It's been a few weeks." And it might sound cheesy, and at first it feels a little cheesy. But as you get into it, the voice of the author, that narrative voice of Adrian, the character, really comes through. And he's got like a dark humor and sarcasm, and he has kind of a bleak outlook, but it's really grounded, and it's not like absolute horror. It fits well with like a Shaun of the Dead vibe.
Yeah.
And so I definitely feel like if you want something that I would consider kind of like light listening, you don't have, this isn't something like you have to take notes of. Like I listened to a book recently, I just finished it yesterday, that Cultists Ted recommended to me, and that was pretty heavy. Like more than one time I had to go back because I wasn't paying close enough attention.
And it was too dense.
And I was like, shit, I missed something. So yeah, this is not that.
Yeah.
This is something you can just listen. It's fun. It's narrative. And it's really enjoyable. This is Adrian's Undead Diary by Chris Philbrook. And it's narrated by James Anderson Foster, who does a really great job. And this is pretty new. Like this omnibus was only put out a few years ago, so worth checking out. How about you? What are you pulling out of the vault?
I'm pulling out Spaced, which I already talked about earlier, but it's a British television sitcom written by and starring Simon Pegg and Jessica Stevenson, who Jessica Stevenson cameos twice in Shaun of the Dead. She's Shaun's old friend that they run into at 2 different times.
Yeah, I think he had better chemistry with her than with Liz.
Yeah, well, they wrote a whole TV show together. So
yeah, it seemed really natural.
Yeah, they are great writing partners with each other. And the whole series, they call a season series in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's 2 series. It ran on Channel 4 from September of 1999 to April of 2001.
So it's of the era.
It's of the era. Both series are directed by Edgar Wright entirely.
Okay.
The Shaun of the Dead concept spun out of a sort of surreal moment that happens in one of the early episodes of the show.
Okay.
That was inspired by Resident Evil, where not Shaun, his character on the show is Tim Beasley, who's like a comic book artist. Anyways, Shaun of the Dead was inspired by this, like a fantasy sequence from Spaced.
Okay.
It's available. It's on Amazon to stream, and there's just I think 14 episodes total. So
what genre is it?
It's a comedy. It's the way it's described. despite having just met, two 20-somethings, Daisy Steiner and Tim Beasley, decide to move in together in order to get a flat with relatively cheap rent.
Okay.
And it's just a real sort of 2000s young Gen X, elder millennial sort of slice of life comedy with sort of surreal moments.
Nice.
It's very much at the head of the curve of the sort of geek humor. With Tim Beasley being a comic book artist, there's lots of, all the sort of Kevin Smithy, like sci-fi and comic book references and things like that. Which it's maybe hard to imagine in 2024, but these things seemed remarkable in 1999. Whereas like these people, like when they're making jokes about like the odd numbered or the even numbered Star Trek movies being shite. It's the odd numbered movies are shite. That was like, oh, that's true. Like you would hear those jokes. And so if you are a fan of the Edgar Wright's films or the Cornetto trilogy movies, Spaced is really like the genesis of that partnership, and it's definitely worth checking out, and you can watch it on Amazon.
Nice. Maybe I'll go ahead and check that out, because I'm a little bit of a lull between things I'm watching right now.
Oh, yeah. It's good. An old show like this that you haven't already binged through is a great thing to find.
It's always a good find.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank you for joining the Nightshade Cult.
Until we meet again, we're wishing you unpleasant dreams.